June 14, 2025, South China Sea. USS Princeton is on a freedom of navigation patrol when its SPY-1 picks up a Chinese Type 052D. From 200 km out, the destroyer surges to 30 knots on an intercept. Beijing's order to the captain is simple: make them link first. This video breaks down the standoff and the gap that decides it. SM-6s outranging YJ-18s. The Nimitz carrier group mass-launching Super Hornets and Growlers. Jamming that turns Chinese radar into static. Real-time Link 16 versus voice commands. Then the twist. A Virginia-class sub has tailed the Chinese force for 8 days and suddenly surfaces 6 miles from carrier Shandong. Stay to the end for how close this came to disaster. 9:23 a.m. USS Princeton is on a freedom of navigation patrol in international waters when the SPY-1 pulls a solid return out of the noise. A Chinese destroyer. Automatic classification jumps from contact to probable combatant in seconds. Initial range is 200 km. Identification confirmed. Type 052D. Track history shows 18 knots. Now it surges to 30 knots in under 2 minutes, trimming its bow to ride the group's wake. At this closure rate, the Chinese unit crosses the weapons threshold in minutes, not hours. On the American side, posture is professional and predictable. Steady course, clean comms, nothing that hands anyone a propaganda clip. The message is simple: lawful navigation, constant vigilance. In the CIC, the tactical officer marks 3 branches: minimal deviation, bridge-to-bridge warning, or elevated readiness. But the priority remains the same. Don't yield initiative, don't offer a trigger. The 052D keeps coming. The track on radar steadies, and the sea fills with small tells that the destroyer isn't merely passing through. Screens show rate of closure. The time to a theoretical weapons-free narrowing. No shouting on the radio, just procedures. Princeton logs everything: time, signature, bearing, estimated shaft horsepower. If anyone wants to argue later, there will be data. The inflection point lands with the missing piece that explains the audacity. The intent assessment, fusing speed, heading, and risk window, returns deliberate intercept. The note that pops on the intel board is brief and clear enough for everyone from bridge to flight deck. Beijing has authorized the Chinese captain to provoke and force American initiative, whatever it costs. The SPY-1, the group's all-seeing eyes, maintains a solid track on the 052D, updating vector, closure rate, and engagement windows with every sweep. Princeton's firepower starts with magazine depth. There are 122 VLS, vertical launching system cells, each able to take different munitions depending on the mission. Long-range interceptors to push threats out, medium-range missiles for the midboard, and, finally, terminal defenses. What matters on the tactical plot isn't just having missiles, but how many, which types, and how well they're tied into sensors. On the outer ring sit the SM-6. In anti-ship mode, they can hit surface targets at over 444 km, with an active seeker and guidance that enables beyond line-of-sight engagements when supported by external sensors like E2D. Visually, think of the radar graphic. The blue bubble around Princeton extends far beyond what the 552D would like to see. The larger the bubble, the earlier you can shoot, and the later the other side realizes it. On the other side, the 552D carries YJ-18 anti-ship missiles, with a combined flight profile and a nominal range significantly shorter than the SM-6's anti-ship envelope. Even giving the YJ-18 generous numbers, the practical limiter isn't just range on paper. It's reliable targeting and guidance. Without an equivalent sensor mesh, the 052D must close enough to get a firing solution with a meaningful probability of hit, pushing it straight into Princeton's kill zone. That's the Chinese dilemma. To fire with confidence, the 052D has to enter the blue bubble. By doing so, it accepts being engaged first by a system with longer useful reach and a superior sensor network. With 122 cells and doctrine built for layered engagement, Princeton can sustain defenses and counterstrikes longer than a destroyer that relies on a short, decisive salvo. And because the SPY-1 keeps the picture updated in real time, the odds increase that the first shot is also the decisive one. The destroyer isn't alone. It's part of the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, a force designed to operate far from home with layered defense and a cooperative sensor mesh. Carrier at the center, cruiser and destroyers forming the protective rings, early warning and electronic warfare aircraft stitching a shared common operating picture. Anything that approaches is seen earlier, classified more precisely, and, if necessary, engaged on terms chosen by the fleet. The mission here is no mystery. Freedom of navigation in international waters, 180 nautical miles from Chinese territory. About $3.4 trillion a year moves through here. Keeping these lanes open isn't a favor to any one country. It's how goods, energy, and food reach every market. The principle is simple. Open seas, clear rules, safe passage. This presence operates with visible professionalism. Steady course, lights and signals in compliance. The contrast with the 0532D's aggressive maneuver is intentional. On one side, procedure and transparency. On the other, intimidation and calculated risk aimed at producing a propaganda clip. The American posture isn't performative. It's doctrine. Sailing predictably and documenting every interaction removes the pretext the adversary is looking for while preserving freedom of action if the situation escalates. Why does it matter? Because the South China Sea is a board where economy and security meet. When a navy tries to claim as its own what the law of the sea recognizes as everyone's, the costs aren't abstract. Insurance premiums rise, routes divert, prices downstream change. 9:35. The E-2D Hawkeye, in a high orbit, sweeps the northern sector and flags multiple launches off Shandong, J-15s rolling in sequence. The theater widens beyond the purely naval. China brings aviation to apply pressure at sea. Altitude, heading, climb rate, formation. The situational picture comes together in seconds. The limiter appears before the first visual contact. Shandong uses a ski jump ramp, no catapults. That forces takeoff at lower weight, less fuel, fewer missiles to clear the inclined deck. It's like trying to take off uphill with a full tank. Either you shed weight or you don't get airborne. Practical result: shorter range, less time on station, and higher fuel burn to build energy. 9:37. USS Nimitz answers with cadence. Launches every 45 seconds. The deck becomes a controlled dance of chaos. Tractors move aircraft, yellow shirts signal, vapor boils off the tracks, and the catapults hurl FA-18 Super Hornets toward the horizon. In the same window, EA-18G Growlers get airborne. Combat mass is put into the sky quickly, with aircraft already configured for a full mission. Formations set up caps at stepped altitudes with overlapping missile engagement envelopes. The side that set the air geometry is the one that got up first, heavier and higher. At the heart of this asymmetry is the AN/APG-79, the Super Hornets AESA radar. It searches and tracks dozens of targets simultaneously, flips modes in microseconds, and operates with low probability of intercept, reducing exposure. On the other side, shipborne J-15s work with mechanically scanned radars. Predictable beams, slower to retask, and easier to detect. When the picture fills, AESA separates signal from noise. The mechanical array sees competing echoes. The next layer decides battles without showing up on camera. EA-18G Growlers take up orbits and power up ALQ-99 pods. Barrage jamming. Thick snow across Chinese scopes. Then deception techniques, displacing tracks, creating ghost contacts, multiplying formations, breaking and reforming radar locks. In the J-15 cockpit, the panel becomes an electronic winter. Returns appear and vanish. Locks fail. Range and velocity wobble. What's real blurs with what's been injected. American comm is rooted in the network. Link 16 stitches in real time. Everything the Hawkeye sees and what each aircraft confirms. Identification, position, and probable intent circulate with no perceptible latency. Without an equivalent mesh at the same level of maturity, the Chinese are left with voice control and tighter formations to keep cohesion. Tight formations under ASA plus EW become a predictable pattern. Easy to fix, harder to maneuver without exposure. Tactically, Nimitz builds a wall in the sky. High, medium, and low caps create crossed zones where any intruder falls into someone's envelope. Super Hornets maintain track-while scan while maneuvering. Growlers degrade sensors and comms. And the E-2D closes the picture with long-range surveillance. The adversary has to fly and figure it out at the same time. The American side figures it out first and chooses when to fly to kill. Logistics enters as a silent multiplier. While Shandong pays heavily in fuel to climb and hold altitude, Nimitz keeps the rearm and refuel cycle turning on deck. Each turn reloads missiles, extends time on station, and keeps the pressure on. In modern combat, production is as decisive as performance. Whoever launches more, sustains more, and sees better sets the pace. In the silence below the waterline, the picture changes tone. Princeton's ANSQQ-89 starts listening to the sea. Low-frequency noise, intermittent pulses, irregular cavitation. The classifier closes fast. Subsurface contact, probable type 039, a diesel-electric. The signature is anything but discreet, noisy, with patterns that recall a submerged locomotive. The sonar team calls contact in continuous track. For Princeton's crew, the protocol is methodical. Log, triangulate, keep distance, don't offer a trigger. The threat exists, but it's on the loud side of the story. 1547. The surface tears like fabric and something immense rises 6 nautical miles off Shandong, a Virginia-class attack submarine. Water sheets off a hull clad in anechoic tile. Masts rise, then retract, not a word. The impact isn't only visual, it's psychological. If a Virginia has sailed 8 days in the Chinese force's shadow undetected, choosing where and when to appear, then the entire intimidation play on the surface was, in fact, staged over someone else's powder keg. In the cold arithmetic of lethality, that means Mk-48 AD caps with firing solutions already computed, crossed axes with aviation and escorts, a kill box primed if anyone crosses the line. Chinese commanders don't see a submarine, they see confirmation they were never in control. The sea closes over the black hull, and the ghost sinks again. On the surface, nothing explodes, because it doesn't have to. The message is delivered. While a 039 makes noise trying to exist, a Virginia chooses when to be seen. Checkmate isn't a shot. It's the certainty, imprinted on every display and every report, that the invisible threat was there all along. From here, escalation stops being bravado and becomes a survival calculation. Anyone who insists on forcing the game learns the ending before the first torpedo leaves the tube. The final act plays out on the invisible spectrum. For 30 seconds, the Chinese destroyer hardlocks fire control on USS Nimitz, the electromagnetic equivalent of pointing a loaded gun. The American response is discipline. No hysteria, no reflexive reciprocity. Princeton logs time, frequency, bearing. The strike group holds to the rules of engagement and makes clear that restraint is not inability. Minutes later, the choreography flips. Ships alter course. The Type 039 slips beneath the layer, and the J-15s return on fumes. Beijing's official line says, scheduled exercises completed. In practice, It's a humiliating withdrawal with a coat of mission-accomplished varnish. The sea remains as it began, open, predictable, under rules. The ledger is unambiguous. The intimidation attempt failed because it ran into multi-domain superiority, useful reach, and VLS depth on Princeton, AESA, Growlers, ALQ-99, and Link 16 in the air, acoustic awareness, and a Virginia choosing when to exist in plain sight. Technology, training, and doctrine become operational asymmetry. See first, decide first, and usually survive. If there's a lesson, it's this. Challenging the U.S. Navy on the open ocean is a bet against geometry, the network, and a century of practice. Force the game, and you miss the moment to quit. Want to see how this logic repeats in the air? China just did something unprecedented to the U.S. Navy. We break down a Chinese aircraft closing on American ships. And the outcome. The card is on your screen now. Click to watch.